Delicious. How was yours, producer Giles?
Oh, yeah, great, thanks, Katie. Are you happy splitting the bill? I think that's the fairest way, right?
Well, no. I had Caesar salad and some tap water, but you had the 28-day aged sirloin steak with a bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild 2005. All to yourself, as well as a side of truffle fries. So, no. We've all been there. The awkward moment of splitting a bill with someone who's ordered a lot more or maybe earns double what you do. It can seem frivolous, but what happens when these small incidents rack up into a bigger drama? And how do you even go about saying to close friends or family, enough is enough? Welcome to Money Confidential with me, Katie Morley. Each episode I head up and down the country to hear directly from you, lifting the curtain on real-life dramas and delving into stories of financial deception, disputes and strained relationships. Today, dilemmas galore. We have not one, but two financial confessions about the sticky situation of friends and family with a wealth gap. One confession is all about being fed up with being taken advantage of, and the other is all about the shame of relying on richer friends. So, what's fair in money and friendship? To match our two problems, we have two experts, including everyone's favourite etiquette coach, William Hanson. So, let's get into it. An email pinged into the Money Confidential inbox a few weeks back from someone who wanted to remain anonymous. We're calling her Maggie, and her problem is voiced by an actor.
A lifelong friend lives in the United States but assumes we are a free London hotel and holiday expense account. Whenever she and her family, 2 children and now a baby, come to the UK to see her family, she expects to stay in my home for up to 3 weeks, justifying it as quality time with me. But then we do not spend any time together without the children, as it's their holiday too. She refuses to stay with her brother and his wife, whom she says is controlling, but she is secretive about her exact dates till the last minute, so she never actually asks to stay for 3 weeks. She just turns up and doesn't leave. I've also come to realise that during her stay, she actively excludes me from social invitations with joint friends unless there will be a bill to be paid, in which case I am often asked to join later, which invariably then involves paying most of or all of the bill. She makes no financial contribution and is quite demanding. Things like booking tickets, hairdressing appointments, driving her around, shopping and cooking their meals. I do have a full-time job. The last few times she visited, she made a big song and dance about it being her last time ever, so everyone treated her to theatre and restaurant outings. I personally coughed up £800 in one day alone. Yet here she is again this year, despite it being very inconvenient for me. Last time her trip cost me over £1,500 in tickets, and I'm fed up with it. I'm fairly sure she will stage being massively offended if I suggest she pays for anything. I try to avoid being around her at payment time, but she just finds another way to charge me later, like by presenting me with the receipt for a pile of hyper-processed food I wouldn't buy myself, and then insisted I ate it. I cannot see this as anything other than intentional, almost a punishment to show me what happens if I try and get round her. I've got to the point where frankly I don't ever want to see her again, but she is very popular with the rest of my friends who do not see this behaviour because I'm the one bankrolling it. I feel petty, which is how she wants me to feel. I spend the whole time seething in anticipation of the next wallop in the wallet. My husband says she's a user, but he just excuses himself. If she was prepared to admit cash was short, we could at least make a plan together, and I would feel happier to pay, as it would be acknowledged. But this feels like she's just stealing from me.
Thank you to Maggie for her letter. Very, very interesting. I knew I had to have expert help with this dilemma from someone well-versed in etiquette, but also not afraid to get down and dirty into the juicy details. And who better than...
What was very interesting in that letter from Maggie is that there is not one redeeming feature.
William Hanson, the UK's leading etiquette coach and best-selling author. Welcome to the podcast. What did you make of Maggie's quandary?
It's not as if she's gone through all of those negative things that this visitor does, but hasn't gone, oh, actually, she really makes me laugh, or she can be so kind, or she's great with my kids, or there is nothing positive. I mean, that's terribly unfortunate. You shouldn't be frightened of your friends. You shouldn't really be frightened of anybody, but particularly your friends, I would say. I think, Maggie, you have got nothing to lose here. So I think you have to be direct with your friend. And, hey, she doesn't come over, she never speaks to you again. I don't think you've lost anything, Maggie.
But right, I think we need to come up with an action plan here for her, don't we? Because she's not only frightened of the friend, but she's also frightened about the reaction from her friendship group, I think, because she says the friend is very popular with the group and the group don't really understand the behaviour. I wonder then if she's kind of protecting the friend by not confiding in the group about the behaviour.
Yeah, I would maybe, rather than sort of going round the group, I would maybe pick one person in the group to talk to about it and sense check them and bring them in on the, look, do you mind if I talk to you? I want some advice. It's a little bit awkward in light of friend, but just between us, do you mind if we just go out for a drink and chat about it?
What sort of things would we be saying here? Obviously, it seems like she wants to maintain the friendship, but I mean, are sat here wondering why, aren't we?
Yes, for whatever bizarre, strange reason she wants to maintain it. I mean, there are two routes you could go. You can either go for the truth, which often the truth is the easiest because you're not going to get caught in a web of lies, and just say, actually, look, it's not convenient for us for those dates. Obviously, it'd be great to see you during your trip. We can go out for dinner, but sadly, you can't stay with us then. Or if she's worried about needing something just to cushion the impact, say that her husband's got a friend staying on those dates and they're in the spare bedroom. I don't know how many spare bedrooms she has. If she lives in a huge house, I mean, that's going to be a problem. But if she's only got one or two spare bedrooms, or you could be terribly proactive and get rid of the bed from that room and turn it into a study or something.
Sorry, I no longer have a spare bedroom. It's now a study.
Yes. Or you have her over still to stay, but make the bed so uncomfortable, pull out some springs from the mattress and just make her have a really uncomfortable stay.
A few toys under the mattress, maybe?
Yes.
Lego?
Yes, exactly. Put a scorpion in the bed or something like that. Not that we have many scorpions in this country.
And there's a whole group of friends here that could have her to stay as well, it seems. Top-notch analysis from the king of etiquette, William Hanson. There's something nagging at me with Maggie's story, though. So I also chatted to Sarah Coles, who's head of personal finance at Hargreaves Lansdown. Sarah, welcome to the show. What are your thoughts?
I would say when you're in an abusive situation, it's often difficult to tell you're in an abusive situation because it will build really, really slowly. So it'll be really innocuous little ways of your spending or your earning being controlled that just really builds over time to something that's completely ridiculous. And a lot of the time people would say, how are you? And you'd say, fine. And there was one particular occasion when I was talking to a friend and I was wearing clothes that didn't fit me because I'd lost a bit of weight. And they said, why don't you just get some new jeans? And I said, I'm not allowed to buy jeans. And it was that person saying, what do you mean by not allowed? That then probed a bit further and got me to talk about the fact that, I bought a pair of jeans previously and because I'd done it, and I actually had a pair that I could have kept, I meant I had two pairs of jeans rather than one. That was considered to be profligate spending, and therefore I was punished with my partner and my children leaving, so being taken away and not being told where they were going or what they were doing. So it was a feeling of, it wasn't that I was told I was not allowed to ever buy jeans. It was more, if I did, I knew I would pay a really horrible price for it. So it's kind of delving a little bit further. It's almost opening people's eyes and helping encourage them. I think in terms of openness, I think if you are open with people about your situation, I mean, obviously open with sensitivities, but if you're open about things, it will open the door to them. And they might not be ready to talk to you. If you feel that somebody's, in a position where they're being manipulated or, they're in a toxic relationship of any description, then just being open to them and then saying, I'm always here. You can always talk to me. And it will help reinforce when they're ready to talk to you, when they're aware of their situation and they're prepared to talk to you, they can then come and talk to you. Because the point at which you're asking them might not be the point that they're aware of it or ready to talk to you or, prepared to take it on to you, because it's a really big issue to sort of, especially if you're sort of living with someone, you've got children with something, it's a lot to go, right, I've got to change everything because this isn't right. And you've got to give people time to get there. I wouldn't say this is definitely Maggie's case, because it does sound like she's tried to raise this with her friend. But a lot of the time when we're getting into these issues, because we're mixing friends and money, we can be afraid to tackle this sort of issue. And it can mean you get increasingly angry, but actually the other person is totally oblivious. And so actually, unless you raise it, then it can be sort of a simmering issue that the other person just has no idea what's going on.
It could be easy to assume that they know how you're feeling, right?
Exactly.
If you're sort of bubbling resentment under the surface.
Yes. And as I say, there are lots of difficult things. So there are lots of different dynamics at play in a relationship, and money is one of them. So in a friendship. So if one of you, for example, earns a lot more than the other, then that can be something that you both know you have to work around. So if money becomes an issue that you find it difficult to talk about, that you haven't sort of found common ground to communicate on, it can be really difficult to bring up. Having said that, I think in this particular circumstances, she's kind of got two ways that she can go. The first one is the way that she was saying, I don't care if I lose this friendship. It's just gone too far. And that is an option. I think we can always assume that the important thing is to keep the peace, to make everybody like us, to fight for a friendship. Well, there are times actually when that friendship isn't worth fighting for, that if we feel that we're completely being taken for granted and that we've tried to push back and we've just hit a brick wall, then the option is to walk away. If she's sort of keen to make things work, then I think the other option is to look at setting some boundaries. So, for example, she talks about the friend she's not clear about when she's going to arrive, when she's going to leave. Well, it might be one of the boundaries she sets is that actually ask me if you can come and stay for specific days, and I'll tell you if you can stay for those days. So it doesn't become being imposed on, it becomes actually this has got to work for both of us. And then similarly, just setting some ground rules around who pays for what when she comes. There might be that she might be happy to pay for groceries, for example, but if there's specific things that her friend wants or needs, that she might want to pop out and get those herself. So it's not necessarily that she's asking the impossible from her friend, it's just really setting some ground rules. And the other option is to talk to a third party, because it can be really difficult when you get into these sorts of situations. It might be that, we obviously don't have the details here, but she's sort of talking about the types of food that her friend likes to eat. Now, I know when I've taken very young children to stay with some very healthy friends, they will have nothing in the house that my incredibly picky children would touch. And so we'd need to go out and buy sausages. It would just be something that we had to do. Now, in those instances, I appreciate that my children are really picky and therefore I'm quite happy to pay for sausages. But it might be that sort of dynamic has happened where she's not been able to feed her children exactly what they need. And therefore she's sort of asked her friend to pitch in. So there's lots of bits and pieces she might want to say to her friend, right, well, I'll buy the basics and you buy the extras. Or a friend might say, do you know what? As long as you get sausages in, I don't care.
Yeah, but that could be stated before the visit, maybe in writing or over the phone.
Yeah, send an email, have a chat. It can be in any way. I think one of the things, though, I would say is that if even at that stage she's getting pushback, then she's got to make a decision about whether she's willing to get into an argument. So, if, for example, she's saying to her friend, she talks about, booking hairdresser appointments and taking her out to the theatre. If her friend is saying, well, you've got to take me to the theatre, then if she's not, that feels like an unreasonable request, then she might think, well, actually, I'm not happy doing that. And you don't have to keep the peace. You don't have to, even if you're trying to set these ground rules so you can keep the friendship, it might just be at that stage you think, I'm getting pushed back on everything. It's just not going to happen.
And I wonder why she has kept this from the wider friendship group as well. I sort of found that an interesting thing, that they don't know about her behaviours. They don't know that she's covering all this financially for the friend.
That is quite interesting because, she's also talking about when her friend came and everybody pitched in and bought nice things and treated her for that last stay. And yet it wasn't the last day. So although she might feel she's shouldering this burden alone, there is a good chance, if it's just how this person behaves and it's, they are relatively toxic in how they behave, then there's a good chance that her friends will be more understanding than she thinks, because they're likely to have gone through the same sorts of things. I would say when she's talking to her friends about this, obviously you don't want to be in a position where you're kind of going around bad-mouthing one of your friends, but if she's going to have this sort of, let's set some ground rules and see where we go from here, she might talk to her friends beforehand and say that this is the situation, this is how things are for me. She will have a completely different view because that's how things work when within friendships. She will have her story, listen to her side of the story, talk to her about it as well, come back, ask me anything you like, and then you make your decision about how you feel about it. So it's kind of accepting that friends are going to talk to friends and everybody's got their own relationship with each other, but also that you will be completely open, and hopefully that will sort of ease the process of everybody understanding exactly what's been going on and how things are going to work going forward.
Thanks to Sarah Coles, Head of Personal Finance at Hargreaves Lansdown. What do you think? Is it time for Maggie to cut ties with her friend? Are they even a friend anymore? Do you agree with the word abuse? Or is that too big a word to use in this context? Email me at moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk and we'll sum up your thoughts later on in the series. Coming up after the break, we flip the coin and hear from the other side of this conundrum. Someone who's too embarrassed to say no to their rich friends, constantly spending money on them. You might think, oh, put away your tiny violin, but it's not as simple as that. Back in a mo. Welcome back to Money Confidential. Real people, real problems, and real talk with me, Katie Morley. Before we hear our next case study, I wanted to share some of your thoughts on last week's story. For those who missed it, Atta makes almost £1 million in turnover from his own business, but is crippled by imposter syndrome. Stephen gets straight to the point and says, your state of mind and happiness exists in your head, not in the things and places around you. Very true. We can often look outside of ourselves for affirmation, whereas maybe looking inward is the way forward. Ian writes, the best way to beat imposter syndrome is not to be an imposter. I have the skills, qualifications and track record of results in my business that means I can show and prove to clients that I'm legitimately the real deal. But I've been doing it 25 years now. I'm not a young whippersnapper anymore. My whip snapped ages ago. Well, maybe he has that evidence too and just doesn't realise it. And I'm sorry to hear about your whip snapping, Ian, but I do hear there's a pill for that sort of thing. And finally, an anonymous emailer writes, I run my own PR/communications firm that operates between New York, London and Washington, DC. And while I don't struggle with imposter syndrome or worry too much about who looks like me in my field, more male than female CEOs in London, I empathise with the sense that you might not be succeeding when objective results, e.g. revenue, tell a different story. A few things that help me. Start talking to people who run similarly sized businesses in other parts of the country, or more relevant, if you are London-based, other major world capitals. They likely will not see you as a competitor, so may be more open about talking finances. I bet you will find that you're doing vastly better, both as a business and in terms of what you personally net from the business than they are. This changes your perspective. Suddenly you realise a lot of people you've been comparing yourself to are actually objectively less successful than you are. It's pretty hard to feel like an imposter when you discover that. And it's also hard to feel like you're not exerting the effort you should be exerting. Well, that's what we love, the Money Confidential podcast community coming together and offering some real-life advice. Now, on to our next case study. Charles, again, not his real name, wrote in with a similar but very different problem to Maggie on the topic of friends with more wealth. Here's his email, voiced again by an actor.
Once a year, I visit my much-loved hometown in Germany. I have no further family in my hometown. For a number of years now, one of my school friends of many decades and her husband invite me to stay with them. It is a genuine invitation from their heart. Usually I stay for about a week max in their lovely detached house. They're both quite well off, whereas I am not, and they know this. Apart from being fed and watered during my stay, they go out of their way to take me places, restaurants, afternoon coffees, and insist on paying. Maybe just the once I managed to pay for a smaller thing, as this has made me feel very uncomfortable. I have spoken with them about it honestly, and let them know that I'd like to contribute in some way, even though this isn't so easy for me, honestly. They probably sense this, and so just said in a nice and humble way that they understand the differences in our financial status and that it's not a problem for them. And again, I know that they mean it. Apart from that, not having lived in Germany for over 50 years, I don't know today's social norms and decorum in the country. Before going, I carefully look for presents to bring them, which is also tricky. They have everything. Ideally, I'd love to stay somewhere else and just visit them once, but this will make them feel bad. Whilst there, I do bring home little gestures, such as a bottle of wine or something similar, but it depresses my tight budget, and whatever I might offer, they have it in a better version. As another visit looms in a few months' time, I'm wondering how to address this without affecting our relationship. Their friendship is more important for me than the external benefits the pretty much free stay is offering.
Let's not dilly-dally, let's get our experts back on the case. First up, William Hanson.
This is an awkward one because everything that I would say to do, this correspondent has done. They've flagged with the friends, look, we can't reciprocate to this level. And the friends have said the only thing that you can say in that instance, which is, of course, it's not a problem. And to be honest, if it really were a problem, they'd probably pull back from doing it if they were. But often those that are high net worth or have a lot of disposable income, they've got to do something with it. And actually sometimes treating friends, regardless of their socioeconomic background, is quite a nice thing to do. Yes, of course, it puts the person on the receiving end of it, particularly if it is happening so often in a slightly awkward place. But actually, all you can do is write them a lovely thank you letter. Just take them around a bottle of something that they like, and don't break the bank buying a rare vintage wine. Just buy something that's nice that they will like. Be thoughtful, be a good house guest, do all the things that don't cost any money as well. And that's that. And maybe on the odd one you say that you're unavailable to go out for dinner, and that might be genuine. You may not be available, but if they really didn't want to treat you, they wouldn't.
And it strikes me that we don't know how much money either party have, but it strikes me that the gulf is really quite wide here.
Yeah.
And that does present some uncomfortable things, doesn't it? But looking at it objectively, I can sort of see it from both sides. But who do you think needs to change their behaviour? Do you think that Charles needs to be a bit more accepting and just not, just accept the gifts and just kind of not fight it? Or actually, do you think that these friends, as lovely as they might be trying to be, might need to kind of rein it back with some of the experiences and the level of luxury that they are indulging this friend in? Maybe they could tailor it to be a bit more simple with maybe country walks or doing things that don't cost as much, and maybe not buying, the vintage £150 or plus bottles of wine while he's there. How can they meet each other in the middle a bit more?
Yes, it's because, again, what one person, Charles, will think of as expensive, actually to the couple that have the more disposable income, to them it could actually just be sort of standard. That's actually, they don't see it, or they might think, well, actually, that's quite a cheap bottle of wine we've bought. To them, they might already have scaled.
Because they're so acclimatised to a kind of high lifestyle that they're not even thinking about it.
I don't know if either party should adjust in this instance. I think it's, if they've got a lot of money, great, good on them, whatever. They can choose to spend it however they like. If Charles has already flagged, look, I can't reciprocate to this, what else is he meant to do?
I suppose I'm just kind of thinking about how Charles might be feeling, and it maybe would invoke kind of childlike feelings within him. If you're being paid for by a party, does it kind of take you back to feelings of being a child and being a bit powerless?
Potentially an inadequate, or gosh, I haven't, quote unquote, worked hard enough to afford this. Obviously, it's got nothing to do with that, but I know some people can feel like that, or I can't compete, and it's feelings of inadequacy. But equally, I'm sure there are probably more people listening to this who are thinking, Charles, I'd love to be in your position. I don't care. If they want to treat me, they can treat me. So maybe Charles shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth too much.
I think it's a really valid point. And also on his thing about presents, I think some of the most special presents don't necessarily cost anything. It's about thoughtful gifts. Could he be making something for them? Does he have any special talents? Could he bring them something really thoughtful or offer his time exactly to do something? And it strikes me that that these people might be lonely. Maybe they value his friendship more than he realizes.
Yes, and one of the most thoughtful gifts I ever got was a host gift for a party. Obviously chocolates, wine, standard champagne that you get. But one of my friends bought me, it was when I used to live in Manchester and I used to do the train up and down to London quite a lot. And it must have been £2, £3, a little Tupperware click and lock thing that had 2 compartments. So you'd put your yogurt, because I had made some comment that often, because I'm getting such an early train, I have no time for breakfast. The train food is rubbish, blah, blah, blah. And so she said, well, here's a little thing. It will fit in your bag. Little thing at the bottom for your yogurt, and then you can put some fruit separate, and then you can mix it in when you want to.
Oh, lovely.
So it doesn't go all soggy. And it had a little spoon that you a fork spoon that you assembled that then sat in the lid. So it was all self-contained, super thoughtful. The most considerate present rather than sort of the standard box of truffles that you might get.
Yeah.
So again, Charles could do something like that, just listen to the cues and what do they need. What do they want? And actually, maybe they do just want his time and conversation. Also, Charles could be doing himself down. He could be a fantastic raconteur and a wonderful person to be around. So, Charles, I would sort of slightly, and I mean this in a nice way, get over yourself and just relax. I think it's okay. You've done everything you need. You've ticked all the boxes. But if you can do something else, and again, write considerate thank you letters, all those sort of things that really don't cost anything other than the paper and the cost of a stamp, you're doing okay.
I love that advice. And, lots of people listening will be finding themselves in this situation or similar situations, won't they? What is good etiquette in terms of what to do on both sides of the coin?
Yes, it's compromise, as so much of life. I mean, I can remember years ago when my now husband and I got together for the first time. It was my boyfriend at the time. He and I went out for dinner with some friends of mine who were slightly older. They're not billionaires. They're just sort of older, and so by definition, because they've worked for longer, had more disposable income. My partner, not a big drinker. Me, not a big drinker either. But we went out for this lovely dinner, and they ordered £100 bottle of wine or something and had most of it themselves. And usually in that sort of instance, what you often find where there is that, or maybe people aren't drinking, is that if the bill is being split, then they pay a bit more. It's not split 50-50. But no, it was split 50-50.
Really?
And we remember going away thinking, really, was that fair? I had maybe one glass, maybe a glass and a half. My partner had half a glass. I mean, we get so many people that write in to my podcast and various other sort of my website where people have gone for dinners and some, the bill comes at the end and someone starts going, well, you had a fillet steak and I only had a sirloin steak and your steak was £4 more expensive than mine. So, and nothing ruins a nice evening more than mathematics. It's so dull when you start doing that. And I say to people, give the same answer. If you are watching the pennies that much, don't go out for dinner.
But are there any instances where people actually should just actually speak up on the night?
Yes. And as in the slighted? Yes, but look, in Britain, we're not very good at this. We're not very good at confrontation. I think if we were American or we were Dutch, you probably would.
Why is that, William?
Because I think we don't like to rock the boat. We're quite safe as a nation. We're very polite. We do manners and politesse incredibly well, comparatively, in this country, even still. And so we want to be confrontation free. And I think we make our judgments and go, okay, well, for the next time, we will, what do we learn? And we tweak the behaviour and move forward rather than, well, what does it achieve? But I'm sure there are people listening that have been in instances where they literally didn't have the money in the bank account to pay for that extra bottle of wine. They hadn't budgeted whatever per head.
That's it. And it's not worth going into overdraft for, is it?
Absolutely not. In which case you do have to say, respectfully, we didn't have any of that wine or we didn't drink. And you often now, with more people not drinking, you often now find those that are drinking, there's what is rather unappetizingly called the wet bill versus the dry bill. And then the sort of the alcoholic drinks are split between the number of people that are drinking and then the food divided by the number of people that were dining.
And do you think we need to get a bit better about being a bit more American, a bit more bold and speaking more openly about money in the UK?
We don't need to start quoting exact figures when we get together with friends because money is, by definition, a little bit vulgar discussing it, sadly, unless it's in a sort of a third-hand way. But for meals, I would, in terms of number of courses, are we drinking? Are we not drinking? Are we doing 3 courses? Are we doing 2? All of that should happen at the start. You shouldn't really get to bill-paying time and have a problem. So when you sit down, talk to each other. Right, how hungry are we? Are we doing 2 courses? Are we doing 3? You would like a first? Okay, well let's do first course and main course, and then review it and see if we've got room for pudding. Just speak to each other. Or someone goes, actually, do you know, I'm not that hungry. I had a big lunch. I'm only going to have 1 course, but I am happy to still divide it by the number of diners, or I'll just pay a little bit less at the end. But I'm very sympathetic to Maggie because I think that she's the more slighted. Charles, I think, just needs to relax. He's got friends that have disposable income to the point where it's, slightly awkward. Okay, whatever. He's done everything he needs to do. And as long as he's writing those thank you letters, then it'll be fine.
William Hanson, thank you again. Do grab his new book, Just Good Manners. Is a cracking read. Right, 2 conundrums, 2 experts. What does Sarah make of Charles's situation?
I think there's a lot of this is around the emotions of hospitality, and how things have been for us. So, somebody who's grown up in a household where doors are always open, food's always on the table, everyone's always welcome, will just want to behave like that towards their friends. Whereas somebody who's grown up in a household that's a lot less forthcoming and might sort of say, well, we don't really like other people in our home, then they might be a little bit more nervous about that sort of thing and might feel that they're imposing. And so I think it's worth actually having those conversations with people. If you're feeling nervous about, if they say, come and stay, and you think, well, I'm really imposing here and I feel really bad about it, then have those conversations. I think another really interesting thing for Charles is that disparity between income. And when you're giving a gift to somebody and that, when you give them the gift, they've already got 50 of them and they're all better. And it can really feel that you're not pulling your weight. And I think, from both people's perspective, it doesn't really make a difference what the gift is worth. Often it can be a gift of your time and a gift of your friendship. So you could say to somebody, you could either think really carefully about something they love, like bring a book that that they'll love, or it can be while you're there, I'll bake dinner one night, and then you're contributing and you're showing through an act of service how much you appreciate your friend's help. So it can be overcome. I think part of it is sort of looking within yourself as to why you feel so bad staying with your friends and whether they feel the same, and just having that conversation about how they feel about you staying, because it might be that that's really what they want and it brings them a lot of joy and pleasure to have you around. I think when there's a real disparity in income between friendships, then it's really important that you're both considerate of it. So, for example, if you've got friends who have an awful lot of money and they're really worried about, I don't know, I was going to say how they can spend it in time, but if they've got rich people problems, so I don't know that they can't quite get the number of domestic staff that they require for the amount of money they want to spend on it, then they need to be really careful if they're talking to somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, how sensitive or insensitive they would be if they start talking about what essentially are rich people problems to somebody who doesn't have that sort of money. And it can work on even a really small level. If you've got groups of friends and you're going on a stag night or a hen night or something like that, and somebody can afford something and somebody can't afford something, and how you navigate that, how you think, well, do I just go on somewhere really expensive and pay for these people, or will they get offended? There's a lot that you need to think about when it comes to those disparities and how you navigate them. And it is really up to both of you as well, because sometimes people are perfectly happy accepting, gifts from their friends. They understand it makes their friends happy to give them gifts. And some people feel put out or patronised or, looked down on because they feel that they're telling them that what they can afford isn't good enough. So there's an awful lot going on around, people's status and money. And so everybody needs to be a little bit sensitive to it.
And there we have it. 2 similar but distinctly different money problems that may seem trivial on the surface. But when you dig a little deeper, it unearths years' worth of interpersonal relationships and power dynamics bubbling just beneath the surface. The thing I think I'm taking away from today's conversation is that if friendships are true and worth hanging on to, then a wealth divide can be overcome so that no one feels awkward. But this doesn't mean that money conversations will always be easy. But the key is usually being honest and open to compromise. Is there something that you want to get off your chest? Email me at moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk or fill in the form via the link below. It takes about 60 seconds and can be totally anonymous. Thank you for listening to Money Confidential. Please grow the show by rating on your podcast app and leaving a nice review. You can find me on Instagram at moneybackmorley. Today's episode was produced by Hannah Walker-Brown. Sound design and mixing by Elliot Lampett, and the series producer is Giles Gear. Ta-ta for now, sausage!